He said that if you were born and right next to you, like your mother and you both put on a watch at the moment you were born, and then you check that watch 30 years later, if you have a perfect watch, it was never out of time, your watch would have a different time than her watch because you have gone through time differently than she has.
Fraction.
I don't understand.
You already know what it is. It's your boy Laid Back with another reaction, another review, another episode. Hey, TikTok, you up to bat. Bah! It's your boy Laid Back. Welcome back to my channel. Hey, two things we got to do. You got to hit that subscribe button. I'm drinking this water. You already know what it is, man. You are the prize in 2025. You are the prize in 2025. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Stay up to date with all the videos. We back with another one. This one right here is going to be interesting, man. This is going to be about time and all type of... So look, just bear with me on this one. If you make it to the end of this one, you a real one for real. It's a lot of conspiracy-ish stuff going on in this one. But I ain't gonna hold you up. Let's go ahead and get into it. Fire Squad. Let's pop it. Let's get it.
This is one of the best ways to visualize our four dimensions, including time. You can see this figure here exists in this larger structure of figures stacked together. Now, each one of the figures that are stacked together is a bit different, right? So you can see when this guy has the light beam through it, it's focused on one of the figures. When you move that entire structure, it looks like the guy's walking. Each one of the figures represents a moment in time in which that figure is changing. But if you notice, this means that all the figures in all states of time exists altogether. Every single state through time of the figure exists. The past, the future, they all exist together. And this is how Einstein's block model of the universe really depicts our universe. We are like the figure in that every one of our past states and future states exists in a larger four-dimensional structure. And every one of my movements through time is actually just a frame that exists in this larger structure. And there's really no flow of time that we think there is. That's an illusion because my future exists and my past exists still. There are past versions of me that are still there in the larger 4D structure of the universe. And there are future versions of me that are already there, out there in the universe somewhere. All of time already exists. It's all there. It's all just eternally existing all together. So why do we experience the flow of time, right? Why does the passage of time feel like it's moving second by second, ticking of a clock? Why is this? Well, if you noticed, in the toy model there was a light beam that was being projected on a particular one of the figures, and when you move the structure, it looks like that figure is moving or walking. So it's kind of like a hologram, right? When you have a two-dimensional shape of the figure in this larger structure and you put a light beam through it, it looks like it's moving. Now, in reality, what makes us feel like time is moving is likely consciousness and our awareness of what's happening. Our memories of the past make it feel like time's moving forward, marching forward. But nobody really knows why there's this arrow of time that seems to only move in one direction from our point of view. But there's a growing number of scientists who think that quantum entanglement has to do with this. Quantum entanglement is actually very closely linked to entropy. And there's another strange idea called the holographic principle, in which our entire universe might be emergent of something happening outside the boundaries of our universe. So quantum entanglement might be the fundamental thread that weaves the fabric of space and time together.
Do your own research. It's going to be deep.
Einstein says we live in a four-dimensional world. We can go forward, backward, left, right, up, down, and the fourth dimension is time. But now we're beyond Einstein, and we have to go beyond 4 dimensions to perhaps, let's say, 10, 11 dimensions. But where are these other dimensions? We think they have curled up. They're so small that you cannot enter them, but perhaps we can feel their effects. And where is this other dimension? It is off the plane of your universe. Perhaps a parallel universe hovering right above your universe in another dimension that we cannot see or touch.
Wow.
But perhaps there's a gateway connecting them. That gateway is the wormhole, a gateway between higher dimensional universes.
This is going to be some...
This scientist claims that human consciousness comes from a higher dimension.
Now, it's worth noting that scientists have been studying or trying to figure out where consciousness comes from for centuries, and they still don't know. So this is Michael Pravica. He studied at Harvard and the California Institute of Technology, and he received a PhD in experimental condensed matter physics. He suggests that human consciousness comes from a higher dimension. So this ties in well with the theory of hyperdimensionality. That is the idea that the universe goes way beyond the visible universe. It's not just made up of the 3 dimensions that we can perceive. Maybe dimensions that are invisible to us, but definitely exist. To understand this, you can go back to my parable of the gut bacterium. But it's essentially this. Imagine you're a bacterium that's living in the gut, okay? Food comes in, you consume the food. Your whole world, your whole perception is that enclosed structure that is the gut. You know nothing about the sun, you know nothing about the universe, you know nothing about farming, the stock market, all the things that go into the food that goes to the human being that consumes it so that the bacteria can consume it. All that exists outside of the bacteria's perception. It wouldn't even begin to know how to comprehend it, but it still exists. Now, we exist in a 3-dimensional plane. Things can be measured by length, height, width, and time. We look at an object like this, we can see that it is a sphere because it has depth to it. But if we lived in a 2-dimensional plane, if we were looking at a sphere, all we would see is a circle. Our perception would not be able to comprehend this. So what we would see is this. Now, there's many different examples of what people believe is evidence that we are experiencing higher dimensions. Even though you might not see a physical manifestation, when you engage your brain in certain ways like creating art, practicing science, pondering big philosophical questions, or traveling to all sorts of far-flung places, it expands your perceptions. You might be actually tapping into something that is higher than what you can perceive. Some people would call this inspiration, but what does inspiration come from? And the source of inspiration just is fascinating to me, like the simultaneous discovery theory. The fact that multiple inventors can exclusively be working on a project and receive inspiration to create something very similar, and they have no interaction with one another. What's fascinating to me about this is the fact that there's many people who have talked about the potential of your higher self, or higher forms of superconscious that you can tap into. Carl Jung would often speak of the collective unconscious, a realm of knowledge that is shared beyond individual mind. Could this collective unconscious come from a higher dimension? Dolores Cannon, who is famous for pioneering the quantum healing hypnosis technique, often talks about accessing your higher self. Through her techniques, accessing people's past life regressions and then the life in between lives, their spirit guides, she gathered information about how not only do we incarnate on this earth, but we are also a conscious power that sends some of our consciousness to incarnations, but it's not always 100%. Dependent on the perceived difficulty, you might need to send more or you might need to send less. The consciousness that is you can exist outside of your body and exist in the higher dimension. Neville Goddard would often talk about the power of consciousness and imagination to shape reality. You can do this by connecting to a universal mind in a higher dimension. Buddha taught about the escaping of the will of samsara, achieving nirvana, the ultimate state of reality beyond ego consciousness. Could this be a reference to a higher consciousness in a higher dimension? Jesus would talk about unity with God, a oneness that connects all beings within love. He also said the kingdom of God is within you. Is that a reference to a tiny piece of a higher consciousness that exists in a higher dimension that is within all of us? And honestly, the list goes on and on. You have Guru Nanak, who talked about Ek Onkar, the idea that there is a single divine source or consciousness where all creation stems from. Everything is interconnected, both light and shadow. It's all an illusion to give us this reality, but we all stem from a higher consciousness or source. There are so many experiences where people talk about higher dimensions, whether through psychedelics, sacred medicines, meditation, breath work, near-death experiences, UFO sightings. I mean, the fact that people can take psychedelics and one of the most common experiences that is reoccurring is seeing machine elves, these higher dimensional beings that we can't comprehend without going into that state of mind. I mean, like, what's the chances of that just reoccurring randomly? Listen, the more I learn, the less I know. The one thing I know is we are so limited by our own perceptions. We can't even comprehend what we don't know, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
That's a fact. Do your own research.
So NASA just came out and confirmed that there is indeed a parallel universe in Antarctica, y'all. This is crazy.
Antarctica.
So they had this balloon, right, to test for particles and stuff like that in Antarctica. Now, during this process, they noticed something that was very strange, and they said that they noticed these molecules that instead of falling were levitating. I literally have chills, y'all. I knew this was a thing. So basically they said that they believe that this means that there is a parallel universe somewhere near or on the island, Antarctica, okay? And this parallel universe literally defies the laws of physics, literally defies gravity, okay? So basically instead of a rock falling down, the rock is going to be going up. So, you know what I'm saying? When you drop something, it's going to go, it doesn't drop, it goes up. Y'all, this gives me very, 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 very strange vibes. The fact that they just came out and said that aliens are real, and now they're saying that there's a parallel universe. The U.S. government is just confirming what everybody already knew.
Man, this stuff is...
Well, today, we physicists believe, we cannot prove it yet, but we are the fish. We spend all our life in 3 dimensions. We go forward, backward, left, right, up, down, thinking that anything beyond our pond, anything beyond our little puny universe is science fiction. We say, bah, humbug. We can't say that anymore because the concept of higher dimensions now is the biggest game in town. You see, in 3 dimensions, there's not enough room to put all the laws of physics. But when you go to this larger pond, this pond of hyperspace, then all the laws of physics just fit together like a jigsaw puzzle.
In our 3 dimension, the laws of physics are there. We can explain things, but there are lots of pieces that seem to be random, that you have to enter constants by hand, and so you might have 30 or so constants of physics and more in cosmology, and they look like they all have nothing to do with one another.
That's right. I like to think of a crystal. Let's say a crystal, a beautiful crystal, shatters and lands on a tabletop. And they're little insect-like flatlanders living on this tabletop. And they say, let us reassemble the crystal. Well, they bring it together, and then they have one crystal. It's called the quantum theory. They assemble other pieces of the crystal. It's called relativity, theory of space-time. But then they try to bring these 2 chunks together, and they cannot. No matter how they bring these chunks together, they cannot. And then one day, someone says, let us go to the world of up. Let us move one crystal up and then fit it into the 3rd dimension, and it will create a beautiful unified crystal. That's where we are today, we think. We live in a 3-dimensional world. We see pieces. We see the electromagnetic force. We see gravity. We see nuclear force. Little pieces of this unified field theory. We bring them together. Now we have the theory of the quantum theory, the theory of the small, the theory of atoms. We have the theory of Einstein, the theory of space, time, relativity, but they don't fit together until you go into hyperspace, and then they fit together beautifully.
So when they fit together, what does that mean? We now learn that we need 10 or 11 dimensions, only 3 of which, or 4 if you include time, that we have, and so there's as many as 6 smaller dimensions, and what's happening in those dimensions? Why do you need 6 in string theory?
They ain't even let them answer this.
From the 5th dimension, you have never reincarnated because you are everything. So from the point of view of the 5th dimension, actually your only spirit is basically expressing itself in different timelines and different spaces. So actually there was no past life, because it's already happening. There's no...
How do they know this? How do they know this about the 5th dimension? Has anybody been to the 5th dimension? Somebody let me know in the comments, because how do they know this?
Future lives, because they are already happening. So actually everything is happening in the 5th dimension. It's actually happening in a lower vibration, which is past, or a high vibration, which is future. So from the point of view of the 5th dimension, the spirit is just looking at a point, and you are just living that reality just by staring at it. From the point of view of the 4th dimension, the soul is traveling in these waves of time, so express itself in one point of those and live the experiences of that. So you can call that the life of your soul, like your soul is living a life. So you have the memory in your soul, you have the memory of that life. Like, for example, I remember many lives in my history, but only 3 or 4 of them are very related to me, as this is something that I actually lived as a soul traveling through time.
What? Oh.
What is the fourth dimension? How many dimensions can there be, and what does it all mean? Well, let's start with the basics. 0 dimensions refers to a point. It's just a single point. 1 dimension refers to a line. 1 dimension. Length. 2 dimensions refers to a plane. Length and width. 3 dimensions, for example, with this cube, it refers to not just length and width, but also height or depth. That's 3 dimensions of a cube. If you notice, we double the amount of points it has as we go up in dimensions. Also, we notice that each one of this cube sides is a square. So this 3D object has 2-dimensional sides, and the same applies to 2-dimensional objects. Every side of a 2-dimensional square is a line, a 1-dimensional line. If we extrapolate this to the higher dimensions, you recognize that the 4-dimensional cube or tesseract is going to have 16 points. Like this cube has 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. A tesseract has 16 points, and each of the tesseract's sides are not squares, but they're cubes. Each one of a tesseract size is an entire 3-dimensional cube. Now, this is unfathomable. This is hard for us to even imagine or conceive of, but we can conceive of it in 2 or 3 dimensions. So, for example, this cube, from your perspectives and from my perspectives, we only see 2 dimensions. If it wasn't for the lighting, you would only see 2 dimensions. These lines, the angles getting smaller or larger. In reality, the corners of this cube are perfect 90-degree angles, but of course, because of this 2D footage and 2D photo and image you're seeing, the angles are going to be distorted. So it's not a perfect projection. The same applies to a 4D tesseract. The image you see of a tesseract are 2-dimensional, right? So the lines you're seeing there, they're all going to be slanted and weird and not 90 degrees. But in a true tesseract, a true 4-dimensional cube, its sides and angles are going to be perfectly straight and all 90 degrees from one another. So that's something we just can't perceive. We're limited to 2 or 3 dimensions. So why can't we see the 4th dimension, and why do we have access to it? Well, let's step down for now and look at a 2-dimensional perspective. A 2-dimensional world would just be full of planes and squares and triangles. This square doesn't know what up and down is. It knows what left and right is, but it doesn't know what up and down means. It doesn't know what depth is. It doesn't have that dimension. It doesn't have access to it. We do. From our perspective, we know what depth means. And from my perspective as a 3D object, I can see every dimension of this square at one time. I can see every side of it simultaneously. But from the perspective of the square, all it knows is length and width, the only 2 dimensions it knows. So if this 3D object were to swoop down into its world, the 3D object would be able to see the square in all of its entirety, but it swooped down and the square would see a point at first as it touched. And then this point would get bigger and bigger into a circle. And the circle will get bigger and bigger till it reaches the center of this sphere. And then it would get smaller and smaller as it passed through the rest of the plane. And it would disappear. Seemingly, from the square's perspective, this object randomly appeared. This circle randomly appeared and then disappeared suddenly. Analogously, us 3D objects are trapped within this 3D world. The 3 dimensions we know of, length, width, and depth. That's all we can do. And just as a 3D object is able to see every dimension of a square at one time, a 4D object is able to see every dimension of a 3D object at one time. So a 4D object could be able to see every side of my body at once. The back of my head, the front of my head at one time.
Crazy.
It'd be able to see in and out of every 3D object, every side of it at once. It's crazy. It's something we can't perceive, but it's true. And if a 4D object were to swoop down into our world, we would see a 3-dimensional side of that 4D object. We would see, for example, in the case of a 4D tesseract, we would see a cube randomly pop into existence, get bigger, then get smaller and disappear, just like the 2D world we experienced before. We would merely be able to see the 3-dimensional shadows casted by those 4-dimensional objects if they were to come into our world, our 3D world. But this raises a weird question. What if many things that we know and love in our world, 3D objects, are actually parts of a higher dimensional reality that is interacting with ours. What if things like quantum entanglement, where from our perspective it seems like particles can behave in same ways from very vast instances, or perhaps virtual particles that seemingly pop in and out of existence, and perhaps dark matter, this weird matter that doesn't interact with us, but it interacts gravitationally. Perhaps these are all manifestations of something higher dimensional happening, 4D or 5D or 6D objects interacting with our 3D world, or 3D brain, as physicists call it. It's possible, but it opens up a door to a whole new reality. Perhaps we are like those two-dimensional square beings who don't know what up and down means, locked in their little 2D world. Perhaps we are locked in our little 3D world, where we're disabled from accessing those other dimensions that are all around us, on top of us right now.
That was very interesting.
Your dreams are important. Pay attention to them. They are putting you into another reality, showing you that there's another reality than this 3D objective world that is bounded by our 5 senses, that there is another side to you. Just like you have an etheric body, you can enter into the 4th and 5th dimension, which is not real in the 3D sense, but it exists. People who can get out of their body can go anywhere they want and do amazing things, even though the rest of us haven't learned how to do that yet.
That sounds like what they call astral projection. Y'all let me know in the comments if you heard of that before, astral projection. That's what that sounds like.
But it's possible that all of us can do that. And what wonderful surprises would we encounter if we had an out-of-body experience and we could do that at will?
This is crazy.
There is no time. Well, there is no time anyway. But we're trapped in the concept. Time is an illusion. And the ETs have said it very clearly. They say mankind will never travel in space until it gets all out of the concept of time. That's what holds you to Earth. And they said we are probably the only species in the universe has found a way to measure something that does not exist.
Wow.
So leave it to us. But if there is no concept of time, we have invented it because, you know, we go day to day, hour to hour. Our whole lives are built upon it. So it's very hard to get away from the idea that time does not exist. But with the idea of simultaneous time, it means everything that's ever happened in your life, childhood, baby, adults, everything is all happening now. And it's all still there. Now, I know with the hypnosis that we do, we can go back and revisit those childhood times, and I've had people become those children again. But that means it's all happening now, and all of your past lives and all of your future probabilities are all now.
This is really crazy.
We know in science that there's more than one dimension. This is what they say now. All of them say it. There's more than one dimension. My question is, do you not think there might be something living in that dimension? This is where the dangers of technology like CERN we don't fully understand. I think they may be opening wormholes to parallel dimensions where that demonic realm may be able to come into our realm with their powers. The power to shapeshift, the power to travel faster than the blink of an eye and bring you back objects. We know this from Solomon. They helped Solomon construct his temple. He used to command the demonic realm to jump into the deepest parts of the ocean and bring out pearls the size of tennis balls. He decorated his temple with these jewels. We know that they can shapeshift from the story of Cain. We know that they can inspire thought and attack us, what you would call telepathy, to project thoughts into our minds. That little cartoon with the angel and the devil on your shoulder, that's real. They follow us everywhere we go. They know how we think, they know what we talk, they know what we speak. It's that thought that you think is yours. It's not.
So I'm going to tell you a little something about parallel realities, and this will help you hopefully to understand how manifestation works. Okay? Every version of you already exists. Every single version of you. Let's pretend this. There's a version of you that was a FedEx driver. There's a version of you that's a billionaire. There's a version of you that is a teacher. There's a version of you that's homeless. All versions of you, all timelines, all parallel realities already exist. Which one you're on is directly linked to your thinking and your perspective. So if I view myself as unworthy, maybe I'll move to that timeline that if I keep going, I will end up as.
Yo, this is crazy. I hate to keep pausing it, but this is crazy. It's crazy to hear this type of. It's crazy. I don't know about you, but my mind is like going crazy right now.
As a homeless person. Maybe my mindset is I'm abundant. I'm worthy of everything. I know I can create it. Maybe you're on the timeline of being a billionaire. You jump timeline to timeline. You can't even grasp how many times you do it in a day. Every time that you have a thought, you jump to another timeline. The key to creating your life consciously is you figure out where you want to go, and then you write down all of the energies, the emotions, the thought forms, the perspective that timeline has, and then you have to hold the thoughts and the emotions of that timeline, and then you will stay on that timeline. But here's the next thing. Imagine that timeline and all of them already exist, but the only one that you're on is the one that's lit up. And the one that's lit up is the one that's getting the most thought energy. So a thought comes in, and then we think about the thought. Most of us are thinking about what we don't want.
Come on,
so
man.
That's the timeline that we're lighting up. That's the one that we're on. But the complete opposite energy of you having everything exists as well. But you have to send enough thinking energy through emotions to that, and then you will start to manifest that reality. So really, at the end of the day, it's about asking yourself, where am I sending my thinking? Where am I steering it? Am I thinking in line with that timeline?
As a man thinketh, so is he.
Or am I thinking more in line with that timeline? And then the timeline that gets the most thought energy, that will be the one that manifests in your reality.
Man, this is wild.
Does time exist? Is time real? We view time as seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, and years, and all of those things can be broken down into one another. And that is fake. Humans made it up. It's a combination of multiple civilizations around the world independently coming up with calendars. So humans seem to have a need to organize and structure what we perceive as time. But the universe doesn't care. What is true in the universe is intervals. So what we call every 365.25 days, the Earth completes an orbit around the sun. And that's a specific set of time passing. But Earth doesn't do it because it's following time. We assigned that time to what Earth was already doing. Light is the fastest thing that we know about, so this has become an important measurement for us. The distance that light can travel in 1 year is a light year. So when light hits us from 6 light years away, we're seeing that object as it was 6 years ago, but for us, it's now. It gets complicated when you think of moving forward and backward in time and time dilation. Because if we're looking at a spacecraft traveling near the speed of light, time would seem to move slower on the spacecraft than it would for us. And also, the universe is expanding, so if we could go into the universe, would we go back in time? Would we bend the fabric of space-time and travel into the past or the future? So the answer to all of this, I don't know.
Right.
It's all insane, and we made up a way to organize it.
Yo, this is nuts right here.
Time is just a big illusion that we all use, but it isn't actually real, and here's how. Since the human mind is able to come up with ideas to solve problems, and then bring it to reality to actually help us, we invented time to help us organize our daily lives. This is why there's no other species that goes by time. Examples like checking the clock to make sure you're not running late, or checking to see what time it is so you can make it home before dinner. Time is definitely helpful, but it's actually just an illusion. This is why they're able to end daylight saving time, because if you push a clock forward or backwards, it gives you the illusion that you're losing or gaining time. But in reality, nothing about Earth actually changed. It was just your perception of it. Another example is if you go to another country or state, you may have went further in time or back in time, but in reality, nothing really changed. Just the clock that says it did. And once you realize that time is an illusion we use to help us, you begin to live in the present moment, which is the only moment that's actually real. The past is only real because you can remember it, and the future hasn't happened, so it doesn't exist yet. So the present is the only moment you should focus on, and time is just an illusion we use in this moment.
Whoa. This is...
He said that if you were born and right next to you, like your mother and you both put on a watch at the moment you were born, and then you check that watch 30 years later, if you have a perfect watch, it was never out of time, your watch would have a different time than her watch because you have gone through time differently than she has.
Fractionally. I don't understand.
Yeah, fractionally. Because the amount of how fast you travel, you experience time in a different way, the path you take in life, the different terrain you travel over the earth, all those factors play in to how much time has passed.
Let's say you live on the top of a mountain and she lives at the bottom. You're actually traveling at a faster rate, right? Because it's no different than, like, let's say there's a ball on a tether, right? And you're just swinging it around in a circle, right? The ball at the end is actually going faster than your hand in the middle swinging it around.
Gotcha.
Right? So since you're going faster, you're actually aging slower.
And we're talking about fractions of seconds.
Yeah.
But over the course of time, it proves that everyone experiences time at a slightly different rate, which proves Einstein's theory that if you do travel very fast in a spaceship and then come back, you would look at your brother who was your age and now he's 100 years old and you're only 30.
Whoa. Whoa. Whoa.
These string theorists that create these models of the universe based on multiple dimensions that we can't access. I think they think there's 11 dimensions. Does that mean that there are existences inside these dimensions like other universes and worlds? They just exist in a different dimension? The thought of alternative timelines, that there's consistently different timelines that are happening simultaneously and that you accessed all of them depending upon your choices and how you live your life and what you do. We think of this as being like a static state of existence, but it's actually not. That we float back and forth between all these different potential timelines and existences.
Yeah. This is wild.
Something that keeps me up at night is how there's no such thing as absolute time. No matter where you are in the universe, time always passes at precisely the same rate for everyone. 1 second is always going to be 1 second. But depending on where you are in the universe, how fast time passes can actually change, which poses a really scary question. The easiest way to understand this is that scene from Interstellar, where every hour on Miller's planet is equivalent to 7 years back on Earth. So for someone on that planet, only 60 minutes have passed, but for someone off that planet, 7 years have passed. This is a very real thing. It's called time dilation, but whose now is more real? I'll put this another way. Theoretically, you could have two events happening simultaneously for one person, and those same two events could be separated by years for another person. Or in someone's time, person A could still be alive, but in someone else's time, person A could have passed away years ago. So is person A still alive? All that to say, there is no such thing as a universal now, and no such thing as a shared present moment.
This making my brain hurt.
There's a good chance that parallel universes do actually exist, and I want to explain to you how you can create one. There's this popular thought experiment in quantum physics known as Schrodinger's cat. It goes like this. You seal a cat inside of a box with a vat of poison, and at some random time, the vat of poison will release and take out the cat. Since you can't see inside of the box, and you don't know if the poison has been released, the cat is technically both alive and dead in a state known as quantum superposition. And the true fate of the cat isn't determined until you open the box and look for yourself. Well, one day, Hugh Everett came around and proposed the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and said that if the cat can be both alive and dead while in the state of quantum superposition, then there has to be a universe where both outcomes exist. The minute that you open the box, your reality splits one way, but there is equally another reality with the opposite outcome. In the many worlds interpretation, there are an infinite amount of universes, and new ones are created every single time that a decision is made, which means that if you're here right now, you made the decision to watch this video, but there's equally another universe where you made the decision to swipe away.
It's true, time gets faster as we age. This graph shows how we perceive time as we get older. According to this, we experience over 70% of our perceived life by the time we turn 21, with everything until age 5 comprising almost 50% of our whole lives. So why doesn't it feel like turning 5 was the halfway point of our life so far? Well, first of all, we don't start forming stable memories until about age 3 to 4, so those years have been pretty much wiped clean. Secondly, as we age, each additional year becomes a smaller and smaller percentage of how many years we've lived so far. So each year that goes by becomes becomes a smaller and smaller sliver of our total lives.
Wow.
For example, at age 50, an entire year is just 2% of your total life. Meanwhile, back when you were 10, 2% of your life was only about 2.5 months. So technically, 2.5 months to a 10-year-old should feel about the same as an entire year would to a 50-year-old. Time doesn't actually move faster as you age. Your brain just has limited storage space. About 2,500 terabytes to be exact, which seems like a lot, but it actually fills up pretty quick considering that we're basically recording a never-ending video into our memories in 16K or whatever resolution reality is. And each year, your brain needs to choose which memories to delete in order to make room for new ones. Meaning, as we age, we slowly forget the most significant memories of our lives, making us feel like we got to where we are today faster than we actually did, while every additional year that goes by feels like a less and less significant portion of our total timeline, causing life to zip by at supersonic speed by the time we hit like 30. Curious to know, what age is your earliest memory from?
Yo, that is crazy. Time do be moving.
Is time even real? A recent series of experiments indicate that the human body can detect events that have happened before they occur. We would call this pre-sentience. They've got a new term for this: predictive anticipatory activity. If you can think of time as a flow, just like the flow of a river, if we were to put a post in the center of the river, that post would represent a significant emotional event. When the flow hits that post, it will create ripples. Some of those ripples occur upstream before the post is reached by the water. Scientists believe this is the way the program of time works. Emotionally significant events, they create ripples that move backward in space-time and precede the event before it ever even happens, sometimes by moments, sometimes by days, sometimes by weeks.
So we're in the third dimension, right?
We're in the third dimension, right.
And what are the other ones? Like, I'm assuming God resides in one of them.
Well, you have the first dimension, which is just lines. The second dimension, which is connected lines. The third dimension, which we're in here now, right? We have XYZ axis. And then you go to the fourth dimension, which is not time. We know the fourth dimension is a tesseract. Tesseract is a fourth dimensional space cube. They call it a Metatron's cube. And anything in the first and second dimension, we can manipulate. Kind of manipulate what's happening in the third, but not too much. We haven't really mastered it yet. Fourth dimension can manipulate anything happening in the third, and so forth and so on. The fourth dimension, you can get access to seeing the past, present, and future happen all at once. For example, we're in this huge hotel right now, right? In the studio. You would see me walking in, it would see you back there getting ready, and then we'd see us sitting here at the same, and it would be us in different rooms, different versions of us all happening at the same time. And so you say, now where's God at? In my opinion, God's on the outside of all of this.
I want to add another dimension to this conversation. Here's a desk in front of me, okay? It's a physical desk, and I have a lot of sheets of paper. And so I lay them side by side. I tile the desk with all my sheets of paper. Then there's no desk surface left. I ran out of two-dimensional space. If I want to store more pages on my desk, what do? I get one of those organizers. I've just introduced a third dimension. So now I could have pages in another dimension sitting above the page that was previously occupying another place that I couldn't have put another sheet. That's 3 dimensions. If we were two-dimensional people, we would wonder what happened to that sheet of paper because we have no access to that third dimension. It would just left our universe. Now imagine a fourth spatial dimension. We don't have access to that. But we're now filling all 3 dimensions. And a 4-dimensional creature will say, well, just put it up in this direction.
What would be the 4th dimension in that regard?
You can't imagine it because our brain evolved in 3 dimensions. We can describe it mathematically.
Joe Rogan looking like, huh? What?
Does time really exist? If you asked Einstein, he would tell you that time doesn't exist at all. In Einstein's special theory of relativity, time and space are actually one entity called space-time. This space-time is related to the energy and speed of matter. When an object's speed increases, time slows down. Similarly, when an object's energy increases, time also slows down. For example, when you really like someone, you might feel that time passes very slowly because you are investing a lot of energy and focus into that person, causing your brain to slow its processing speed, making you feel like time is dragging. When a person passes away, we say they...
Man, I know everybody done experienced that. You vibing with somebody, you like, dang, it's just, time just... You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man.
They're gone, but we continue to remember and miss them as if they were still with us. This is because their influence remains. The things they did and said continue to affect us, meaning their influence is a form of energy. This ongoing influence makes it seem like they are still alive in a way. So, from a certain perspective, people never truly die. They just exist in another form. Just like how ancient people, though physically gone, continue to influence us through their writings, images, and works. From this viewpoint, they too never truly died, but exist in another form. Returning to the question of time, it is essentially a perception, a feeling. When you are fully engaged in something, time feels like it moves very slowly. Conversely, when you are idle, time feels like it flies by. For instance, the universe is about 13.8 billion years old, while the human lifespan is only a few decades. Relative to us, isn't 13.8 billion years just a fleeting moment? Thus, we cannot definitively define what time truly is.
This is good stuff right here.
Is time travel possible according to physics? In 2009, the physicist Stephen Hawking threw a welcoming party, but he sent out the invitations after the party had already ended. His reasoning was simple. If time travel to the past was possible, future time travelers would learn about the invitation and come to the party. However, no one showed up, leading Hawking to the experimental evidence against the possibility of backward time travel. But what about forward time travel? Well, according to Einstein's theories, it is possible to travel to the future since time is relative and is affected by speed and gravity. Time slows down for objects moving at a speed close to the speed of light and in high gravitational fields. For example, near a black hole, time for someone near the event horizon would pass much slower compared to someone who is far away. Going back to the past might be paradoxical, but there are some theoretical possibilities such as closed time-like curves, which are a way for space-time to curve and loop back on itself, allowing something to go back to its past, and wormholes that are believed to serve as tunnels connecting two different times. But none of these ideas have been confirmed yet, making backward time travel impossible.
Einstein predicted in his special theory of relativity that time is relative. An object in motion experiences time dilation, meaning that time moves more slowly when one is moving than when one is standing still. Time dilation may sound very theoretical, but it does have practical applications as well. If you have a GPS receiver in your car, the receiver attempts to find signals from at least 3 satellites to coordinate your position. The GPS satellites send out timed radio signals that the receiver listens to, trilaterating its position based on the travel time of the signals. The challenge is, the atomic clocks on the GPS are moving and would therefore run faster than atomic clocks on Earth, creating timing issues. So, engineers need to make the clocks on a GPS tick slower. In general relativity, the flow of time doesn't only depend on your velocity, but the local gravitational field as well.
This stuff here is wild.
Why is time different on different planets like in Interstellar? So that's an easy question to answer. It's Einstein's theory of general relativity. As you come closer to a planet, then your time, so let's say you have a watch and you look at the watch, then you'll see the watch tick at the normal rate, 1 second per second, and you won't see anything unusual. But from the perspective of someone far away, that watch will be ticking more slowly than their watch. And it's really to do with the distortion of space and time in the vicinity of the planet. So the general rule is if you go to something that's very massive, so you approach a very massive planet or even a black hole, then as you go there, from the point of view of someone far away, they will see your time tick more slowly. So that's I was going to say basic general relativity. Should we leave it at that? That's it. Everybody should know a bit of general relativity.
He said that's basic. I'm sitting here like,
time isn't real. You hear this phrase all the time, but what does it actually mean? Time simply moves. Yes, we have a past, present, and possible futures that you could visit just by closing your eyes. But time is a universal law that we've made into a construct as a unit of measure. Really, there's only the present moment, but also life forms, depending on what they are and who they are, will experience time differently. So time really is relative. And like Einstein said, the distinction between the past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. For example, an ant will experience time differently than a human. It will see us as moving slow and it as moving normally. But to us, the ant is moving really quickly and we are moving normally. Both life forms are just experiencing time differently at different speeds. Or you could say they're experiencing time differently. This is depicted well in the movie Epic when the main character gets shrunken into the fairy world and the world that she's from moves super slowly. Also in my favorite series, The 100, when the characters land on Skyring and 7 years is only 2 days off planet. To extraterrestrials, they have their own unit of measure, but they also perceive time differently depending on their vibration. For beings with higher consciousness, they will perceive time as going by way faster than we do. 1 day on Earth may be like 1 day in their perception. On galactic terms, since scientifically the galaxy is a living being, and seeing how we perceive things as being created and moving very slowly in the galaxy, I would assume that 1,000 years is comparable to 1 day. Time is super interesting. I noticed that the smaller a life form is, the faster time is, and the bigger a life form is, the slower time is. This is all quantum physics that I have yet to get into. This was only the basics, but remember this. Time the law exists, but time the concept doesn't.
What?
So it turns out that Einstein was right when he said the distinction between past, present, and future is an illusion. There's now proof of this. Here's what they did. They took 2 atomic clocks, which could keep time down to a billionth of a second. They set them to the exact current time, then put them on airplanes flying around the world in opposite directions. When the clocks got back to where they started, what they showed was that the time had passed more slowly going in one direction than the other. Now get this, 2 identical twins. One gets put on a high-speed rocket, goes out into space, comes back. Afterwards, the twin who stayed on Earth will have aged more than the one who went into space. I love this because it backs up something I've always believed, that past, present, and future exist all at once. Time is an illusion.
This is just mind-boggling.
Monsters, Inc. Did you guys see this film? These are monsters that work in a door factory, and they make these doors, and they open the door, and it is the door of a kid's bedroom or their closet. And they step through and they're in the kid's closet. And then they scare the kid because that's their job. They're monsters. Okay? This doorway is a portal through the 4th dimension and then back to the 3rd. So imagine a new storage system. We just go to Home Depot and buy a door. And that door is your portal to a 4th dimension. You open the door, put your boxes, close the door, you look on the other side of the door, there's nothing there. So this is what's going on when you have access to higher dimensions.
Wait.
One day someone's going to invent a time machine. And that when they invent a time machine, all time ceases to become linear. So you think if you have a time machine, well, I'll just go back to the time where they were making the pyramids and I'll watch them do it. That's not what it works like. What he was saying, you can't travel where there are no roads. So once a road gets built, then you can travel. So once a time machine gets invented, then anyone from the invention of the time machine forward to forever can come back to that moment and can go to any point in time from that moment to the end of time. So all time ceases to be linear. Tomorrow will be Wednesday and the next day will be Thursday. No. It's everything happens everywhere all at once. So people can travel back and forth through time. The world itself would be completely unrecognizable because time would mean nothing. As long as you could freely time travel, there will be no time. Because how can anybody invent things when they can just travel to a point where someone invented it already? But how are they gonna invent it already if you can just travel to the future?
Man, what?
Nobody has a real definition of what the word time actually means, what it is. The best that we can do in physics is posit that there is some axis, there is some quality that we can measure change by invoking. Is that a real definition of time? Not really. In our equations, we have a little variable called t. It's introduced in basically all the dynamical equations of physics. And yet we are still struggling to figure out, is it something we impose from the outside because it's a useful way of organizing experience to have a temporal order to things? Is it fundamentally written into the laws of reality that there is this thing called time? Might there be realms of reality where there is no time? These are the big, tough questions that we've yet to fully been able to grapple with.
Yeah.
When we're talking other dimensions, what does that mean?
Well, the universe, let's call it the cosmos, is described by astrophysicists as sort of this 3D thing. Now, if you look at quantum entanglement and the concepts of the universe being a holographic conscious entity, which it is, then you start talking about not just material, but you're also talking about other dimensions that are at refined levels of frequencies and vibration. So the speed of light, the speed of electrons, atoms, what have you, all of that would pertain to what we call the 3D, three-dimensional. If you were to cross over that in frequencies, then you're talking about other embedded dimensions, but it's not like it's some distant place, it's folded within. So, a hologram, if you look at a hologram of Marilyn Monroe with her dress blowing up, like that. If you were to just zoom in on one little piece of that dress on the edge of her skirt, and zoom in on it, the entire image would be in there. And zoom in again, it's holographic. So you have to kind of get your mind around the cosmos is this conscious quantum hologram. And so there are many, many, many dimensions. Not just this plane of 3 dimension, that is all enfolded within it. So a lot of the confusion happens where everything like something weird, like a poltergeist event, will be conflated with something extraterrestrial. Well, it isn't. So that kind of phenomenon isn't extraterrestrial, it's interdimensional. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay, so I'm trying to do some very kind of crude analogies, but the confusion comes in is that if you're an interstellar capable civilization, which means you're going from point A in the cosmos to here, B, it's like if this were a piece of paper, you're not going a straight line across the paper, you're folding the paper, being space-time.
Okay.
And so these 2 points are here.
I'm enlightened now.
And so, but in the process of doing that, this sort of bending and altering space-time, you then bump up against and cross these other dimensions. And this is sort of the intersection between what some people call metaphysics and physics, or the conscious worlds and the worlds of light, if you will, and the mystics would call astral, and extraterrestrial technologies. And it's a very interesting intersection.
Yeah, my brain is like...
Neil deGrasse Tyson explained this to me, that the universe is so big that not only is there another you out there that has done everything exactly as you've done. Every pause, like that pause, every pause, down to the second.
Yeah.
An infinite number of times.
Yeah.
So there's one where you get up right now and you have to take a piss. And you run out of the room. There's one where you get up and you're mad that we don't believe you that you saw Bigfoot or something. Infinite universes. Like the size of the universe, 14 billion light years apart, infinite numbers of those. Not only that, they think that inside every galaxy is a supermassive black hole, and inside that black hole may be another universe with hundreds of billions of galaxies, with hundreds of billions of black holes. Inside each one of those, hundreds of billions of galaxies, hundreds of billions of black holes, that it's fractal, and that it's impossible for you to even conceive.
Whoa.
You have never met someone at a place unless it was also at a time. And you have never met someone at a time unless it was also at a place. We know intuitively that we need 4 dimensions to localize someone to meet up with them. Only 2 dimensions if you don't have tall buildings. You have tall buildings, you need the 3rd dimension. So you don't say, I'll meet you at the 20th floor of 721 Park Avenue. What time? There's a full 4 dimensions going on there. Just I want to convince you we live in a 4-dimensional world.
Oh, he said because of time. Okay.
We're living in a universe based on 11 dimensions. We know that based on theoretical physicists like Michio Kaku and many other well-respected physicists, they theorized based on the mathematics that without 11 dimensions, this universe would collapse.
What is a dimension?
Well, dimension is a realm that exists at a different frequency. So right now we're in the third dimension. We only can control the first and the second. The first dimension is a line. The second dimension is connected lines. And because we're in the third dimension, we're like the God over the second and the first. We can control and manipulate those dimensions from the outside. The fourth dimension is a tesseract, a fourth dimensional hypercube. From the fourth dimension and all the way up, things change completely. So we're in the third. Somebody in the fourth dimension, an entity, can see into everything. They can see through this ceiling and watch us sitting here right now. They can see the past, present, and future all at the same time. In other words, when I first walked in a building and you greeted me, they would see that. In another room, they would see us taking photos. And in this room, they would see us doing this interview, but they would see all three things happening at the same time. And then above that, you have the fifth, sixth, seventh. Now these dimensions are compactified. They're stacked so tight on top of each other. So if there are beings in higher dimensions, they can theoretically walk from their universe or their dimension directly into ours. This could be some of the reason for paranormal activity and things like that. Entities or beings having a peek into our world, into our dimension.
Ooh-wee.
Multiverse. Okay. I'm a quantum physicist, and we quantum physicists don't believe that the Big Bang happened once. That would violate the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And that means that there could be multiple bangs happening all the time. Even as we speak today, universes are being created. And that fits the data. The inflationary universe is a quantum theory. So there's a certain finite probability that universes are being created all the time. And for me, this is actually rather aesthetically pleasing because, you know, I was raised as a Presbyterian, but my parents were Buddhists. And there's two diametrically opposed ideas about the universe. In Buddhism, there's only nirvana. There's no beginning, there's no end, there's only timelessness. But in Christianity, there is the instant when God said, "Let there be light." In other words, an instant of creation. So I've had these two mutually exclusive ideas in my head, and I now realize that it's possible to meld them into a single theory. Mm-hmm. Either the universe had a beginning or it didn't, right? Wrong. You see, our universe had a beginning. Our universe had an instant where somebody might have said, "Let there be light." Ooh. But there are other bubble universes out there in a bubble bath of universes, and that means that these universes are expanding into a dimension beyond our three-dimensional comprehension. In other words, hyperspace. In other words, 11-dimensional hyperspace. So nirvana would be this timeless 11-dimensional hyperspace where big bangs are happening all the time. So we can now combine two mutually exclusive theories of creation. And Stephen Hawking, for example, even in his last book, even said that this is an argument against the existence of God. He said there is no God because there was not enough time for God to create the universe, because the Big Bang happened in an instant of time. Therefore, there was no time available for him to create the universe. But you see, the multiverse idea means that there was a time before time. And there are multiple times. Each bubble has its own time. And so it means that there could actually be a universe before the beginning of our universe. So if you think of a bubble bath, when two bubbles collide, or when two bubbles fission to create a baby bubble, that's called the Big Bang.
All right, so that was another TikTok compilation dealing with time, dimensions, all that. First of all, you made it this far. You a real one for real. Let's go ahead and say that. This was very eye-opening, intriguing, interesting. It got these gears going. It's like a lot of stuff going on. Wow. You know what I'm saying? Before you leave though, drop in the comments. What do you think? What was the conspiracy, the theory that stuck with you the most pertaining to time, dimensions, whatever it was? This was very, very interesting to say the least. But look, man, till next time, self-love and positivity, Fire Squad, I got you and you know it. Whew.